Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson. Tonight we've been assessing the Biden administration for more than a year, trying to figure out what the themes are, and here's the conclusion we've come to. There is, in fact, a single principle that guides the Biden administration. Here's what it is. Your rights as an American are not, in fact, inalienable. We know this because Joe Biden himself has said it out loud several times. He's reminded you that your constitutional protections extend precisely as far as he says they do. Now, the framers famously claimed that a citizen's rights come from God, and the government's job is to protect those rights. That was the deal. But the modern Democratic Party, which will not acknowledge God, has inverted that formula. So now politicians loan you your rights, and they can take those rights back at any time, depending on your level of obedience. Think of it as dog training on a national scale. Woof. So it's Joe Biden who gets to decide which drugs you're forced to inject into your body. Joe Biden will determine whether you can have a 4th of July barbecue at your house. Ask Joe Biden. He'll tell you whether you have to repay your student loans from Yale Law School, whether landlords can evict tenants who aren't paying their rent, etc. These are all Joe Biden's decisions now, and his decisions alone. So Joe Biden gets to tell you how many rights you have and under what condition. And that's another way of saying you don't really have any rights at all. Think about that. So if you have no permanent rights as a citizen of the United States, then needless to say, state and local governments can't have rights either because you elected them. So you can vote for all the lawmakers you want, but in the end, Joe Biden will determine what the law is. The president's publicist made that point very clear at the briefing yesterday. Watch Jen Psaki denounce the state of Alabama for passing what is, in Alabama, a very popular law that bans the castration of children in the name of gender transitioning. Now, Joe Biden doesn't like that law, therefore, that law is invalid. Here's her explanation.
Alabama's lawmakers and other legislators who are contemplating these discriminatory bills have been put on notice by the Department of Justice and the Department of Health and Human Services that laws and policies preventing care that healthcare professionals recommend for transgender minors may violate the Constitution and federal law.
Oh, it's just so great. She's reading it verbatim. So to be clear, suddenly politicians are not allowed to tell doctors what to do. What, you ask? I've been in this country the last 2 years. Nope, politicians can't tell doctors what to do. No, that's the new rule. So why did that rule change? Well, because the Constitution of the United States specifically protects chemical castration of minors when it's conducted in the name of something called trans rights. That's the Transgender Amendment. You knew that. It's a good thing you do know it, because if you were to disagree with it, Joe Biden's Department of Justice may very well send men with guns to arrest you. And don't laugh, tempted as you may be. Jen Psaki is dead serious. She wasn't smiling. She was as solemn as an undertaker as she read the talking points written for her by some activist group. And it got more solemn. Watch.
Today in Alabama, instead of focusing on critical kitchen table issues like the economy, COVID, or addressing the country's mental health crisis, Republican lawmakers are currently debating legislation that, among many things, would target trans youth with tactics that threatens to put pediatricians in prison if they provide medically necessary life-saving health care for the kids they serve. Every major medical association agrees that gender-affirming health care for transgender kids is a best practice and potentially life-saving.
It's so unbelievable. Who wrote that, you gotta wonder? These people do have brass telling you, really, you should be worried about COVID. Yeah, more people died under Biden than under Trump. You should worry about the economy. Has it ever been this bad in your lifetime? But instead, you worry about all this dumb stuff that we don't care about at all, except it's all we talk about. But here's the medical guidance we just got from Jen Psaki. Slicing off a child's sex organs, preventing a 12-year-old from going through puberty. That's not ghoulish and dangerous and horrifying. No, it's not. It's, quote, gender-affirming health care. Indeed, it's all we're now calling a best practice. Now, best practice is a term that doesn't actually have a definition, but it does sound science-y, like something a physician might say. And in fact, some physicians do say it, but that does not mean that it's true. We know it's not true because this question has actually been studied in some detail. In the UK, there's a slightly bit more freedom in the science field. Researchers commissioned by the National Health Service have reviewed all available evidence on puberty blockers, and they're finding there is, in fact, quote, very low evidence that puberty blockers help anyone. Oh, so what are the long-term effects of these powerful drugs in the bodies and minds of children? Well, we don't know, according to the study that's, quote, largely unknown. But it's not totally unknown. We do have some data, and they're not encouraging. Another group of researchers in the UK tracked the effect of puberty blockers on young people aged 12 to 15 over a 9-year period, longitudinally. And they found that after just 1 year on puberty blockers, children were far more likely to say they wanted to hurt or kill themselves. Oh. Kids on puberty blockers also experienced stunted growth and weaker bones. They had measurably lower IQs. These are not minor side effects. These are tragedies. If you cared about children, you would care very much about these results, but the White House doesn't care at all. Why don't they care, you wonder? Maybe because none of this is actually about helping transgender kids. They don't care about transgender kids, and shame on you for thinking they did. Maybe there's another agenda. What could it be? Well, in New Jersey, a state senator called Holly Schlepsy has taken a close look into a company, and there are many of these, but she looked at a company called Amaze.com. Amaze.com creates gender-affirming sex ed materials for children, little kids. Now, Amaze.org, rather, is backed by the abortion industry, but its videos address all kinds of sexual topics. Here's one of their videos on pornography. The video begins by asking, is it normal to watch porn? Here's their answer. Find out more about porn right here on Amaze. Oh, thanks. I'll send it to my rest of my 5th grade classmates. That's on YouTube. So we reached out to Amaze.org this afternoon. We wanted to know who these videos are aimed at. Obviously small children. They didn't really answer our question. Instead, they attacked us with maximum self-righteousness. Quote, your show's repeated attacks on curricula and resources proven to protect children of all ages is deeply disturbing. Oh, so they're talking to little kids about porn, but we're the creepy ones. Spend some time at Amaze.org's website and YouTube channel, and you'll find a lot more cartoons like this, and all of them are clearly intended for young children. In one video, there's a simulated image of a child furiously masturbating in front of porn on a computer monitor. Not joking, look it up. In another cartoon by Amaze, kids learn all about oral sex. Yeah, you make the decision, because you're in 5th grade. It's your decision. Guess whose decision it isn't? Your parents. They have no role in any of this. That's the point. Amaze.org is producing videos like this and flooding schools with them with the full backing of the Democratic Party. So the key here is not whether you agree or disagree with the message. The key is that parents play no role in the decision. That's the point. Cutting parents out, destroying parental authority, destroying the family. So in classrooms, Amaze.org isn't even necessary a lot of times. Some teachers do the jobs themselves. We know that in part because of the hard work of a Twitter account called Libs of TikTok, which you ought to follow before it's banned if you want to know what may be happening in your child's school. Libs of TikTok just unearthed this video. It shows a teacher bragging to her students about her sex life. Little kids. Watch. So underneath all of this, needless to say, and you can't say it enough, is narcissism. It's about me and my identity and my journey. It's not about you or your children, teaching them anything. It's about me. Let me talk about me some more. But if you speak, if you say you don't like this, you don't want your kids learning from people with face piercings about porn and oral sex, and paganism, you could be prosecuted by Joe Biden's Justice Department. So to be clear, this has nothing to do with the Constitution, nothing to do with science. It doesn't even really have a lot to do with sex. Are they creepy? Oh yeah, a lot of them are super, super creepy. Should they be around kids? Absolutely not. But it's not really about trying to groom little kids. Overall, it's even worse than that. This is an attempt to usurp the most basic of all parental rights. Because if you're a parent, only you get to talk to your kids about sex. Why is that? Because sex, like religion, is something that the state doesn't intrude on. Different families have different attitudes about sex. And the federal government doesn't get to decide what those attitudes are. You do. You're the parent. It is none of Joe Biden's business. It's not the business of his creepy little publicist what you think about human sexuality or what you tell your kids about human sexuality. Period. It's your prerogative, not theirs. Now, for centuries, this has been very obvious. Strangers who talk to children about sex have by definition committed a sex crime. So if you were to show up on a playground and show nude pictures to 3rd graders or videos about masturbation or oral sex, we would arrest you. But Biden wants to change this. Why? Because he wants control over your family and your values and your beliefs. He wants to determine what your kids learn about the deepest and most important issues there are. So it's not about sex. It's about your mind. And that's what they want control of. So Pete Buttigieg's husband just made this explicit. Here he is in a documentary financed by Jeff Bezos, of course, forcing kids to pledge allegiance to something called a pride flag. You need to complain about this. If you don't like this, you're against gay people. Well, most Americans have no problem at all with gay people whatsoever. Most Americans know gay people and in a lot of cases love them. It's not about that. It's about whether you have the right to pass on your values, which may be different from Joe Biden's values, onto your children. Do you have that right? If you don't have that right, you're not really the parent. Joe Biden is. This isn't really a free country at all. Affirmation of equal rights for all. Right, but what about the people who don't want their children force-fed other people's opinions about sexuality? Those people don't have rights. Those people get a DOJ investigation. Here's Pete Buttigieg to explain.
Your husband, Chasten, is a teacher. And he's been a vocal critic of what's going on in my state of Florida with the so-called "Don't Say Gay" law now, which he says will kill kids. Do you agree?
Yeah, he's right. And I get the political reasons why they're doing this. By the way, some of those political reasons is they don't have a plan on anything else, right? I mean, they don't have a plan on dealing with inflation or dealing with gas prices.
Man, these people have brass. That's the guy in charge of our transportation system. Try to fly from Tampa to Denver tomorrow. See how much it costs you. What are the odds your plane lands on time? That's the guy in charge of our transportation. But there he is on The View calling you a criminal because you may not have fully digested his very specific views about sexual values. They don't have a plan for inflation or gas prices. They always accuse you of doing exactly what they're doing. J.D. Vance understands this. He's running for the Senate in the state of Ohio. He joins us tonight. J.D. Vance, thanks so much for coming on. So they're daring you to disagree with any of this because if you do, you hate gay people. I don't think this is about gay people in any way. I don't think it's even about sex. I think it's about controlling the most intimate decisions in your family.
Yeah, it's who controls it and who benefits from that control, Tucker. You know, one of the things that's often unsaid here is that one of the biggest donors to the Democratic Party are, of course, the big pharma companies. Who benefits when parents are not allowed to make decisions regarding their kids when it comes to chemical castration? Who benefits when doctors are pressured to give these medicines to 7, 8, 9-year-old kids? Well, of course, the pharmaceutical industry that gives a lot of money to the Democrats. And I think actually Republicans need to take a page from Trump's playbook here. Remember when he went after the insulin companies for making insulin too expensive? We need to say to these pharmaceutical companies, you don't get a free right to experiment on our children, right? It's insane that that even needs to be said, but of course it does in the crazy times we live in.
It's such a good point. And the same puppets of big pharma in the Biden administration who 3 months ago were telling us you have no choice but to take pharma's products are now telling us you have no right to have any say in whether your kids take them. So it's like politicians can control whether you take the drugs. Now they're not allowed to control. Like, what's the standard?
Well, the standard is clearly whatever's in the best interest of Democrat values, whether those are your values or not, and whatever's in the best interest of the profits of these companies who donate to Democrats. You know, what I find so preposterous about this moment is that on the one hand, the Democrats are actually advocating to teach about sexuality and crazy gender theory to 7-year-old children. And on the other hand, they get offended if we throw around terms like groomer to push back against it. It's like, look, if you don't want to be called a groomer, don't try to sexualize 6 and 7-year-old children. It's really that simple. And at the end of the day, like you said, this is about parental rights. What kind of a country do we want to live in where families control what values their children grow up in, or where Joe Biden and the pharmaceutical companies get to do that? It's pretty clear what I think 90% of Americans, what kind of country they'd like to live in.
I don't understand where the men are. Like, where are the dads? You know, some teachers pushing sex values on your 3rd grader? Why don't you go in there and thrash the teacher? Like, this is an agent of the government pushing someone else's values on your kid about sex. Like, where's the pushback?
Well, one of the crazy things we know, Tucker, is that this is hidden from parents. I mean, I agree with you. There should be a ton of pushback. I'm a father of 3 young kids, and I would get enraged if I found out this was happening at my kids' school. But you hear all these crazy things about, 5-year-old kids go into school as boys, but then they go into the magical closet and they come out as their gender affirming identity. Of course, that has nothing to do with the crazy lunatic who's pushing them on them. Of course, we're led to believe, of course, it's all coming from 5-year-old children. So one of the things we're learning, Tucker, is that this is being forced by some of these really radical teachers, and they're hiding it from the parents. That's maybe the most pernicious part.
Not acceptable. J.D. Vance, running for Senate in the state of Ohio. Primaries next month, I think. Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks, Tucker.
So we're going to show you a tape that we don't want to show you because it's so shocking. We checked twice, it's real. Here's the question. If you had to define America in a single word, what would that word be? So in the Rose Garden today, Joe Biden tried to answer that question. Watch carefully how he did.
America is a nation that can be defined in a single word. I was in the foothills of the Himalayas with Xi Jinping, traveling with him. I actually traveled 17,000 miles when I was vice president. I don't know that for a fact.
What do you say? This guy's running the country. Hopefully not for long. Not capable of running the country. But notice the reaction. At least Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was dignified enough to look deeply embarrassed as the president just skipped a groove in his head and went off about marching in the Himalayas. But you'll notice his vice president sort of nodded oh yeah, of course. If you could find America in one word, it would be the 17,000 miles I traveled with President Xi through the Himalayas with the Yetis. She'll nod to anything. Well, CNN's chief eunuch, in the final days he's working at CNN, thought it'd be a good idea to speak to college students about disinformation. One student noticed the obvious. Wait a second, pal. You're America's chief disseminator of disinformation. So, from our irony files, this is one of the greatest stories ever. So, the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics and the Atlantic magazine just hosted a conference, no self-awareness whatsoever, entitled Disinformation and the Erosion of Democracy. So needless to say, they invited all of your favorite purveyors of disinformation and exponents of censorship. Barack Obama, Jonah Goldberg, Ann Applebaum, and of course Brian Stelter. There was no IQ bar, apparently. What the speakers didn't count on, the expected hours of just bloviating, is that there are still a couple of kids at the University of Chicago who are awake enough to say, wait a second, what are you talking about? Disinformation? Here's one exchange.
You've all spoken extensively about Fox News being a purveyor of disinformation, but CNN is right up there with them. They pushed the Russian collusion hoax. They pushed the Jussie Smollett hoax. They smeared Justice Kavanaugh as a rapist, and they also smeared Nick Sandmann as a white supremacist. And yes, they dismissed the Hunter Biden laptop affair as pure Russian disinformation. All the mistakes of the mainstream media, and CNN in particular, seem to magically all go in one direction. Are we expected to believe that this is all just some sort of random coincidence, or is there something else behind it?
I think you're describing a different channel than the one that I watch. But I understand that that is a popular right-wing narrative about CNN.
It's a popular right-wing narrative. Never trust anyone who uses the term narrative, by the way, just for the record. Christopher Phillips is the man you saw in that clip. He's a freshman at the University of Chicago. He joins us tonight. Mr. Phillips, thank you for joining us. What possessed you to confront these purveyors of disinformation?
Hi, Tucker. Thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor. The way I've always been is to search for truth and ask questions to sift through the lies and find out what's really going on. So myself and two of my colleagues at the Chicago Thinker, the University of Chicago's premier publication, Evita Duffy and Daniel Schmidt, we three went to this conference, and we see right when we come in a ton of people, a ton of legacy media employees whose entire careers have been spreading disinformation. Those are the people who are telling us about how to avoid disinformation. So, I hear Brian Stelter, and he talks for 30 minutes about how Fox News is this huge purveyor of disinformation. They're the enemy of the people. And then I come up and I say, wait a second, run that back, because actually CNN, from what I've seen at least, is probably 10 times the purveyor of disinformation that you claim Fox News to be. And, he didn't really have a great answer for it.
Well, some of the examples that you threw at him, are subjective. I agreed with your take on it. But some of them were just objective. Like CNN did dismiss Hunter Biden's laptop as Russian disinformation. That kid's on camera doing it. Wouldn't it have been better if he would have said, yeah, I got that wrong. I'm sorry about that. Wouldn't that have worked?
Gosh, I mean, to tell you the truth, I didn't exactly expect him to hand over the keys and say, you know what, we're corrupt. Go ahead, Chris, and make CNN the truth. But I did kind of expect him to say, we retracted those stories and we apologize for saying that. And we always, keep a clean. We try to keep a clean record. But there was no apology. There was no remorse whatsoever. It's just, I don't know what news network you're talking about. That's not mine. When in reality, he said these things on CNN. It's all documented.
Yeah, it's hard to have credibility if you won't admit that you make a mistake ever. Everybody makes mistakes. We certainly have, but just admit it. So, what was the reaction from other students at Chicago to your question?
Well, there's a lot of social pressure to conform to the leftist narrative, to conform to the radical agenda at college campuses. So just working for the Chicago Thinker really is, kind of inviting you to be canceled in a sense. But a lot of people, I have to say, actually really liked my question. They thought it was fair. They thought it was honest, and it was pure journalism, and I respect everyone who told me that. Some people were not satisfied with it, but regardless, I think I did a good thing in asking Brian, what gives as to CNN's bias.
Yeah, and just just touch reality once a day. Reassure us that you're not demented, but he didn't. Chris Phillips from University of Chicago, a credit to your generation. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Tucker. And everyone needs to check out thechicagothinker.com. Right now, we publish a lot of stuff on campus craziness. No one else is doing it like we are. So hit us on Twitter and Instagram as well. Hit me at ChrisPTheTruth for more.
I looked at it this morning. It's good. Chris Phillips, thank you. So we've chronicled the destruction of maybe the prettiest city in North America, San Francisco. It was a great place. People really wanted to live there. Now people are leaving. Why? Because there's human feces and needles on the sidewalk. The city supports open drug use. A group of mothers has just launched a campaign to speak out about the drug crisis that everyone is ignoring. One of the co-founders joins us next. No more beautiful city in this country than San Francisco. It's always been liberal, now it's falling apart. And it's falling apart because San Francisco's politicians have destroyed it. And they've destroyed it with drugs. The city of San Francisco distributes millions of needles every year to drug addicts. They've opened up a drug treatment facility that is in fact an open-air drug market. One group of mothers in San Francisco is hoping to save that beautiful city. Here's a local news report on their efforts.
Mothers have a message, and they want everyone to read it. So it's writ large in billboard form, looming over Union Square. It says, famous the world over for our brains, beauty, and now dirt-cheap fentanyl. They want what they call the open-air drug markets shut down. The problem, they say, fentanyl is too affordable and too available. One small business owner says he supports the mothers and hopes this sparks some necessary change.
I can't imagine how the billboard would be a problem in this case. The fentanyl dealers are the problem. Fentanyl is a problem. The billboard is a message.
Well, exactly. Jackie Berlin is the co-founder of Mothers Against Drug Deaths. She joins us tonight. First of all, Jackie, thank you so much for doing this. It feels like if this doesn't work, what will?
Thank you so much for having me, Tucker. I can't imagine what would work aside from this, but we're definitely looking at taking this campaign internationally if this doesn't work. We were very, very frustrated when Mayor Breed declared a state of emergency, and 3 months later, she ended the state of emergency, and we did not see any change in the state of the Tenderloin or the open-air drug markets. And then after declaring an end to the state of emergency, she went to Europe to promote tourism in the city. And that's when my group, Mothers Against Drug Deaths, decided that we needed to do something because we don't believe that the city is safe right now for tourists to come to. Families should not be coming to a city where there's open-air drug markets. There's drug dealing on the streets and drug use openly on the streets. People are half naked with needles sticking out of their arms, pipes and foil tainted with fentanyl in their hands. And we just are flabbergasted that on the heels of a state of emergency that Mayor Breed would go out and promote the city as a destination.
Well, so the name of your group, I think, makes a really important point, which is this is not compassionate. People are dying, more than 100,000 last year. Mothers Against Drug Deaths. Tell us why you call it that.
Absolutely. We call it Against Drug Deaths because so many people are dying on the streets, about 2 a day in San Francisco from fentanyl overdoses. The open-air drug market also increases crime. Just in the last 8 days, the first 8 days of April, there have been 8 shootings, 4 which have resulted in deaths. It's created more criminal activity and turf wars, but it's also causing children people in San Francisco to die, basically from the fentanyl overdoses. And I spoke with my son on Sunday, who is a fentanyl addict himself on the streets of San Francisco, and he told me that he's seeing more and more people, unknown faces, coming into the city to buy fentanyl and then to take that out into the suburbs with them. And he's been seeing more and more high school students, high school age students also coming into the city and purchasing fentanyl for use. And this is incredibly concerning to us. We're worried about the fentanyl that's going back to the suburbs being put into other kinds of drugs and sold to the children, the high school students there. And we're also worried about people getting addicted to fentanyl and then coming into the city and increasing the homeless issue.
Well, you've gotten right up in their faces with this, and I hope that you will stay there until they relent and stop these deaths. Jackie Berlin, I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
We intend to. Thank you very much.
Please do. So they told you there was a plot by right-wingers to kidnap the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, but it turns out they were lying. So a stunning verdict handed out today in that case, which has collapsed. It's an amazing story. Next. For the 2020 election, which is totally fair, Joe Biden blamed Donald Trump for an alleged plot to kidnap the governor of Michigan, then as now Gretchen Whitmer. Now, at the time, Whitmer praised the FBI for saving her from the 13 domestic terrorist white supremacists. Watch.
Earlier today, Attorney General Dana Nessel was joined by officials from the Department of Justice and the FBI to announce state and federal charges against 13 members of 2 militia groups who are preparing to kidnap and possibly kill me. If you break the law or conspire to commit heinous acts of violence against anyone, we will find you, we will hold you accountable, and we will bring you to justice.
Totally mesmerized by the sign language interpreter behind her. Didn't hear a word she said, except she made the point that everyone agrees with. If you try and hurt someone, you should be punished. So, okay. But it turns out the story was not at all what they claimed it was. From court documents, we learned that there were more FBI agents and informants involved in this plot than actual kidnappers. We also learned that a lead FBI agent on this case was a political partisan and, in fact, a violent criminal himself. BuzzFeed News, for whatever reason, and to its great credit, covered this, but the rest of the media totally ignored it. They kept praising the FBI, in fact. Watch.
Militiamen who were so angry about Whitmer's COVID restrictions in Michigan that they were plotting to kidnap and possibly kill her over it. Those men were ultimately arrested by the FBI.
Just hours after the FBI exposed a dangerous terrorist plot to kidnap her.
13 men were arrested in an alleged domestic terrorism plot to kidnap and possibly execute Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer for what they called treason in an attempt to spark a second civil war.
Why do they let that kid on TV? Let's spark a second civil war. It was all a lie. Today, a jury, we still have those, acquitted 2 men on all charges in the kidnapping plot and then could not reach verdicts against the other 2 plot leaders. Are they going to apologize? Probably not. Charlie Duff is the host of the No BS News Hour with Charlie Duff, the last reporter in the state of Michigan. He joins us tonight. Charlie, what do you make of this?
What? It's over? Oh, my God.
Apparently.
Right? I mean, look. These guys were yakking off on Facebook like we all do. They went overboard. The FBI gets wind of it and starts leading these guys down the path. I don't know about the rest of the media, but I said this thing stunk.
Yeah.
Jury reached the same verdict, man. I mean, there's a difference between mouthing off and then the feds walking you into a case, and it's really important, brother. And everybody wake up at home. Google this. The lead FBI agent was fired after he beat his wife because she wouldn't throw down at a swingers party. What is this? It's ridiculous.
Well, it is ridiculous. And BuzzFeed, again, I never compliment BuzzFeed, but they did the reporting. The majority of the conspirators, they were awesome in this. They really were. The majority of conspirators are working for the FBI? What? Like, how is that allowed?
Look, man, it goes like this, right? There has to be some overt action when you're conspiring to kidnap. And the overt action was they were all out in front of her vacation home, but the driver was FBI and the guy that had the dynamite was FBI. And look, I'm glad it's not just me and it's not just you. It's a jury of our fellow citizens, right?
Right.
Not guilty. And of course, OJ's not guilty either. You got to stand by it. Move on to cancel. That's really what this is all about. The system worked again.
Wait, really quick. She's running campaign spots telling you she survived a plot?
Not yet, but you just played them before I got on, and you didn't think those things were ready? Of course they were going to do it, dude. This is the lamest race in the country, and look, everybody stick together. You know what? The lead guy on this, he's going to be retried. He was living in the basement of a vacuum repair shop. That's my cousin, right? He doesn't have a boat to take you over Lake Michigan, to go to Wisconsin, to lock you in a barn, to hold you on trial, and then sentence you to 5 years in a dog kennel. Seriously.
I don't know what that means, but I'm with you, man.
That was the plan. That was the plan, dude. That was the plan.
So great. Thank you for reporting the news. Charlie LaDuff of Michigan. Amy Wax is a neurologist, one of the smartest people we've ever talked to. She's a tenured professor at University of Pennsylvania Law School, Penn Law. So tenure means, the point of tenure is that professors get to say what they think. But Amy Wax dared to say what she thinks, and now she's moving toward being fired because she's a bigot, etc., etc. So we decided to speak to Amy Wax and let you judge for yourself. It was all in a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson Today.